A diver's hand closed around a lump of corroded bronze in the wreckage of an ancient ship. That unassuming find was the Antikythera Mechanism, a 2,000-year-old device that rewrites everything we thought we knew about ancient science. By the end of this journey, you will understand how a single artifact forces us to redraw the entire timeline of human ingenuity. How could a civilization from before the Common Era build a machine with gears more precise than any clock for 1,000 years after its time? And why was such genius lost for centuries? What does it truly mean when we say that history can be forgotten? The storm that drove those divers to shelter was a stroke of historical luck. It was the spring of 1900, and a crew of Greek sponge divers, men who braved the deep without modern equipment, were caught in a sudden gale off the rocky coast of Antikythera. Seeking calm water, they anchored in a small bay. When the captain sent a diver down to check the seabed, the man returned gasping with a story no one believed. He spoke of a chaos of shapes below, of horses and people, all made of stone, lying in the silent dark. They had found not a simple reef, but the remains of a colossal Roman merchant vessel, shattered on the cliffs centuries before the birth of Christ. The subsequent salvage operation was perilous and primitive. Divers descended on breath alone, hauling up breathtaking bronze and marble statues, exquisite glassware, and coins that dated the wreck to around 70 years before the Common Era. It was a treasure hunter's dream, and among these masterpieces, brought up in a net, was a lump of greenish rock about the size of a large book. It was catalogued vaguely as a piece of corroded bronze, perhaps a navigational instrument, and set aside. Its true nature was hidden beneath centuries of hardened sea deposit. For months, it sat in the back rooms of the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, utterly overshadowed by the graceful statues. Then, one day, it cracked. As the crust dried and split, a museum employee saw something impossible inside. Not solid metal, but a series of finely toothed gears, layered like a mechanical puzzle. In that moment, the lump of rock transformed. It was no longer debris, it was a machine, and its silent, intricate heart began to whisper secrets from a past we thought we understood, challenging the very narrative of human progress. How could such complexity exist in an age we had labeled primitive? The answer lay not in the sea, but in the machine's purpose, a purpose that would take decades of brilliant deduction to uncover. The gears inside that broken shell were a language no one could read. When Valerio Stais, a curious archaeologist, peered into the crack in 1902, he saw the first hints of a mechanical soul. Tiny, precise teeth interlocking in ways that should not have existed for another millennium. His mind raced for a familiar box to put it in. Perhaps it was a kind of astrolabe, a sailor's tool for the stars. Or maybe a clock, though nothing like its medieval descendants. These were the only references his world provided, so the official record labeled it an astronomical device, a vague and safe term, and the fragments were returned to their museum case. For decades, they rested there, a quiet enigma surrounded by louder, more beautiful treasures. The problem was one of imagination. Scholars of the early 20th century viewed the ancient world through a specific lens, one shaped by Victorian ideals of steady, linear progress. The Greeks were philosophers and artists. The Romans were engineers of aqueducts and roads, but complex precision machinery. That was the domain of the Renaissance and beyond. The mechanism did not fit the story, so the story could not accommodate the mechanism. It was easier to assume it was a simple, if ornate, curiosity than to accept that the entire timeline of technical achievement was wrong. Our own preconceptions became the greatest barrier to understanding, turning a revolutionary artifact into a mere footnote. The truth was trapped not just in corrosion, but in our willingness to see it. That quiet museum case held a technological bomb. To grasp just how explosive it was, you have to step back into the accepted story of human invention. For generations, historians charted a clear, upward path. The ancient Greeks gave us democracy, drama, and geometry. The Romans built roads and aqueducts. Then came a long period often called the Dark Ages, where such knowledge was preserved or lost. Finally, the Renaissance rekindled that classical flame, leading eventually to the scientific revolution and our modern world of machines. In this tidy timeline, complex geared mechanisms, the kind with interlocking toothed wheels that perform calculations, had a very specific birthplace, medieval Europe of the 1400s, with the invention of the first weight-driven clocks in cathedral towers. These monumental timekeepers were seen as the pinnacle of mechanical ingenuity for their age. So when researchers finally cleaned the Antikythera fragments and saw not one or two, but dozens of intricate bronze gears, some smaller than a coin, with teeth cut at precise 60-degree angles, the cognitive dissonance was profound. It was not just finding an old clock, it was like finding a modern smartphone inside a Victorian writing desk. The object was not merely old, it was impossibly advanced for its time, a stark and silent rebuke to the entire narrative of linear progress. This was not a missing link, it was a whole forgotten chapter. The device proved that the seeds of high mechanical art were planted and had flourished in an era we had assumed was only capable of philosophy and sculpture. The question then became not just what it was, but who could have possibly built it, and what happened to that knowledge that it vanished so completely for over 1,000 years. The machine's true voice would only be heard when someone learned to listen with new eyes. For decades, the fragments remained a beautiful puzzle without a guide, until a British science historian named Derek de Solla Price decided to look not just at the surface, but straight through it. In the 1950s, armed with the primitive X-ray and gamma-ray imaging of his day, Price did something revolutionary. He peered inside the calcified lumps. For the first time, the ghostly shadows of internal gears, previously hidden, became visible on film. It was like using a dim flashlight to map the rooms of a forgotten cathedral. Price spent years in a meticulous, almost obsessive study, counting gear teeth, measuring fragments, and tracing how the components might have aligned and turned together. His patience was rewarded with a revelation. In 1974, he published a groundbreaking model, arguing this was no simple star chart. He called it a calendar computer. Price proposed the Antikythera mechanism was designed to calculate the complex motions of the sun, the moon, and likely the planets, predicting their positions in the sky and even forecasting eclipses with a turn of a hand crank. His seminal work, most famously shared in a Scientific American article titled Gears from the Greeks, did more than present a theory. It changed the entire conversation. With his evidence, the mechanism was transformed. It was no longer a curious museum oddity to be glanced at and wondered about. It was now a serious, profound subject of scientific and historical inquiry. Price had provided the first real map of a lost continent of knowledge, proving the device was a product of deliberate, sophisticated engineering. His work was the crucial key that unlocked the door, but it was just the beginning. He had shown the world what the machine could do in theory, but the deepest questions of how it worked, and more importantly, why it was built, still hung in the air, waiting for a new generation of technology to provide answers. Derek de Solla Price had given us the map, but the next explorers would need a new kind of light. That light arrived in the form of a medical scanner. Around 2005, a global team of scientists, historians, and astronomers formed the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project. Their most powerful tool was not a chisel or a brush. but a microfocus X-ray computed tomography machine, the same technology used to peer inside a human body without a single incision. For the first time, they could see through 2 millennia of corrosion as if it were glass. The scanner rotated around each fragment, taking thousands of razor-thin digital slices, which a computer then stitched together into a perfect 3-dimensional model. This was the ultimate non-invasive archaeology, a virtual time machine that let researchers digitally disassemble the machine gear by gear, layer by layer, without ever risking damage to the original bronze. What they found inside was a library of hidden text, faint inscriptions etched onto the front and back plates and even on the sides of the gears themselves, emerged from the shadows. These were not random markings, they were a user's manual and a technical specification fused into one. The words described planetary motions, cycles of athletic games like the Olympics, and most stunningly, detailed predictions for solar and lunar eclipses. The scans revealed a level of mechanical complexity that was breathtaking. Dozens of interlocking gears, including a remarkable differential gear, a component so advanced it would not be seen again until the 19th century automobile. This was not merely a calendar computer as Price had theorized. It was a portable cosmos, a simulation of the heavens engineered with a precision that rewrote the history of technology in a single, silent revelation. The front face of the mechanism was its grand cosmic display. Picture a large circular dial about the size of a dinner plate, made of gleaming bronze and inscribed with intricate, spidery Greek letters. This was the Zodiac dial, a map of the sky itself. A single, elegant pointer representing the sun would have glided slowly around this circle over the course of a full year, pointing to the constellation the sun was passing through from our view on Earth. You could look at this device on any given day and know not just the date but the sun's precise place in the celestial tapestry. Yet if this were all it did, it would have been a remarkable but straightforward calendar. The genius, the true magic, is in the correction. The Earth's orbit around the sun is not a perfect circle, it is a slight ellipse. This means the sun appears to move across our sky at a variable speed, slightly faster at some times of the year and slower at others. A simple, evenly spaced gear would make the pointer move at a constant rate, creating a small but cumulative error. The ancient engineers solved this with a stroke of mechanical brilliance. They connected the sun pointer to its driving gear not with a fixed axle, but through a pin that slid within a curved slot on a secondary gear. This ingenious pin and slot mechanism subtly sped up and slowed down the pointer's motion throughout the year, perfectly mimicking the sun's actual uneven journey. It was a physical model of a cosmic truth, a mechanical embodiment of a law of planetary motion that would not be formally written down by Johannes Kepler until the 1600s. With this one quiet, ticking component, the builders demonstrated they were not just tracking the heavens, they were simulating its very rhythm, achieving a level of predictive accuracy that feels utterly alien to its time. But the sun was only half the story, for the ancient sky had a second ruler, one far more erratic in its behavior, the moon. To track its ever-changing face required a different kind of genius, one that spoke not just to science but to the very rhythm of society. On the back of the mechanism, opposite the grand Zodiac display, lies one of its most visually striking features, a large spiral dial, its coils etched with 235 tiny compartments. This is the Metonic spiral, named for the Athenian astronomer Meton, who formalized the cycle in the 5th century before the Common Era. It represents a profound celestial harmony, a 19-year period after which the phases of the moon return to fall on the exact same calendar dates. Imagine the challenge: a lunar month is roughly 29.5 days, while a solar year is 365.25. They do not align neatly. Over time, a calendar based solely on the moon would drift completely out of sync with the seasons. The Metonic cycle was the ancient world's brilliant solution, a way to weave the lunar and solar years together into a coherent tapestry. A small pointer would have advanced one compartment each lunar month, slowly winding its way around the spiral over those 19 years. This was not merely an astronomical calculator, it was a long-term calendar computer for an entire civilization. Its purpose was deeply practical, governing the schedule of sacred festivals, agricultural cycles, and major civic events like the Olympic Games, which were held on a 4-year cycle embedded within this larger 19-year framework. Here, the mechanism reveals its true nature. It was a bridge between the cosmos and the community. It took the cold, predictable mathematics of the heavens and translated them into the living, breathing calendar of human life, showing us that for its creators, understanding the sky was essential to organizing society itself. Yet the most profound power of this machine lay not in tracking time, but in foreseeing moments when time itself seemed to break. Adjacent to the Metonic spiral on the back, a second, slightly smaller spiral dial held a more ominous purpose, the Saros cycle. This was the mechanism's Eclipse Predictor, a mathematical crystal ball spanning 223 lunar months, roughly 18 years. The ancient Greeks observed that solar and lunar eclipses, those awe-inspiring events where the sun or moon seems to vanish from the sky, do not occur randomly. They follow a rhythmic, repeating pattern along this Saros cycle. If you witnessed a total eclipse, you could be confident that a similar eclipse would occur in a similar part of the world, 18 years and 11 days later. The builders encoded this entire celestial rhythm into bronze. Tiny inscriptions survived on the dial fragments, etched beside specific compartments. The words are chillingly direct: sigma, epsilon, lambda, eta, nu, eta, Selene for the moon, and eta, lambda, iota, omicron, sigma, Helios for the sun. But they went further than mere labels. Some of the inscriptions even forecast the characteristics of coming eclipses, hinting at their likely color and the direction from which the shadow would approach. To us, this is a triumph of predictive astronomy. To an ancient person, it was something else entirely. It was the power to demystify the divine. Eclipses were universally seen as terrifying omens, moments when the gods expressed displeasure or signaled great upheaval. The sudden, unexplained darkening of the sun could plunge a city into panic. Imagine, then, the authority held by the individual who possessed this device. While others trembled at the unexpected night, this person could consult the gears and state calmly that the event was not a random portent, but a predictable, natural occurrence. They could even describe it before it happened. This transformed fear into foreknowledge, granting the owner immense social and possibly political influence, positioning them not as a victim of the gods' whims, but as a privileged interpreter of the cosmic order. The mechanism was, in this light, as much a tool of statecraft as it was of science, a means to wield the heavens themselves to guide or control the people below. But to truly grasp the scale of their ambition, you must look beyond the sun and moon. The CT scans revealed tantalizing clues of a far more elaborate system, one that aimed to bring the entire known cosmos into that small bronze frame. Scattered inscriptions and the ghostly traces of lost gear trains point to a breathtaking conclusion. The Antikythera Mechanism also modeled the motions of the 5 wandering stars, the planets Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. This was not just a calendar or an eclipse predictor. It was a miniature universe in motion, a planetarium powered by a hand crank. To understand why this is so revolutionary, you have to stand under an ancient sky and watch a planet like Mars for months. Night after night, it drifts eastward against the backdrop of fixed stars. Then, inexplicably, it slows, halts, and for a few weeks appears to travel backward in a loop before resuming its original path. This retrograde motion was the great puzzle of classical astronomy. The stars were orderly, but the planets were wanderers in the truest sense, their paths defying simple circular motion. Greek philosophers like the brilliant Hipparchus devised elegant geometric models to explain this. They proposed that each planet moved on a small circle, called an epicycle, whose center itself traveled along a larger circle around the Earth. When you combine these two rotations, the planet, as seen from Earth, traces that characteristic looping path. This was a beautiful abstract theory, written in geometry and mathematics. The builders of the mechanism did something almost unimaginable. They translated that theory into bronze and gear teeth. To physically produce retrograde motion, they engineered a system of nested, epicyclic gears mounted on the faces of other gears. As the main drive train turned, these small secondary gears would rotate at their own pace, causing a pointer on the front dial to advance, slow, reverse, and advance again, perfectly tracing the planet's paradoxical dance across the Zodiac. This was more than engineering, it was philosophy made solid. It took a cosmological idea, a model of how the heavens should work, and proved it could be made to actually work with a tangible, ticking mechanism you could hold in your hands. In doing so, they created a working argument for their understanding of the universe, a machine that didn't just calculate the sky, but physically demonstrated why the sky behaved the way it did. The genius lies in that fusion where abstract thought becomes undeniable physical proof. This simulation of planetary motion was a marvel of abstract engineering, but to capture the moon's true behavior required a different kind of genius, one that dealt not just with loops but with a subtle, persistent wobble. The moon does not orbit Earth in a perfect, steady circle. Its path is an ellipse, meaning its distance from us constantly changes. When it is closer, it appears to move faster against the stars. When farther, it slows down. This variation in speed, known to astronomers as the first lunar anomaly, posed a massive problem for any machine claiming to model the heavens accurately. A simple gear train would make a moon pointer crawl at a constant pace, quickly falling out of sync with the real, living moon in the sky. The solution devised by the ancient engineers is arguably the mechanism's single most breathtaking piece of machinery. They created a miniature masterpiece of kinematic theory entirely in bronze. On one of the key gears, they mounted a small pin. This pin did not sit on a fixed axle, but instead engaged with a curved, sloping slot cut into a second, freely rotating gear layered directly above it. As the main gear turned, the pin would slide along this slot. Think of it like a camshaft in a car engine, but in reverse, where the changing position of the pin within the slot subtly alters the rotational speed of the output. This pin and slot device acted as a variable transmission, a tiny mechanical computer that continuously adjusted the speed of the moon pointer. With every full rotation, it would cause the pointer to speed up and slow down in a smooth, predictable wave, a perfect sinusoidal representation of the moon's actual uneven journey. This was not a rough approximation, it was a precise mathematical function cast in metal. To achieve this over 2,000 years ago displays an intuitive grasp of complex motion that feels utterly modern. In fact, this very principle of differential gearing, where motion is summed or varied through the interaction of components, is the foundational concept behind the differential axle in every automobile today, allowing wheels to turn at different speeds around a corner. In the Antikythera Mechanism, that same profound insight was used not to navigate a road, but to navigate the cosmos, granting a small bronze pointer the soul of the moon itself. It stands as quiet, physical proof that a mind of extraordinary caliber once conceived of a universe governed by rules that could not just be written down, but could be built. While the gears were the machine's beating heart, the inscriptions were its voice. Etched with a precision matching the engineering, over 3,000 microscopic Greek characters cover the surviving plates, dials, and even the sides of the gears themselves. This was not decoration, it was a complete integrated system, a user's manual and data library fused directly into the bronze. The text guides you through the device's functions, labeling the zodiac and month names on the main dial. It catalogs a parapegma, a sophisticated weather calendar that links celestial events to the rhythms of the Earth. Specific inscriptions note, for instance, that the rising of the constellation Pleiades heralds the start of the spring sailing season, while the setting of Arcturus signals the time for the grape harvest. This transforms the mechanism from a purely astronomical instrument into a practical guide for agriculture, navigation, and civic life, directly tying the cosmos to human activity. The language used is notably technical, dense with specialized terminology about planetary cycles and eclipse predictions. It speaks not to a casual user, but to a scholar, someone already deeply versed in the astronomical theories of the day. This clues us into its likely home. It was probably not a common tool for sailors or farmers, but a masterwork created for and used within a community of advanced learning, perhaps a philosophical school like the Academy in Athens, or even within the library or workshop of a Hellenistic king who valued such knowledge as a symbol of enlightened power. The inscriptions are the final, crucial piece of evidence, proving the device was not a one-off experiment, but a refined product of a mature technical tradition, complete with its own documentation. To read them is to listen in on a conversation between a master and an apprentice, a silent lecture preserved in metal, explaining not just how to turn the crank, but how to see the universe as a great, predictable machine. The voice of the machine is clear, but the hands that built it remain hidden in the shadows of time. Who was this master engineer, this philosopher of gears, who conceived of a portable cosmos over 2 millennia ago? We have no name etched beside the inscriptions, no signature on the bronze, yet the device itself carries subtle clues about its origins, like a unique accent embedded in its design. The astronomical data encoded within its cycles, particularly the eclipse predictions, align most precisely with observations made in the eastern Mediterranean between 205 and 100 years before the Common Era. The elegant, formal style of the Greek lettering points to the same late Hellenistic period, a golden age of science just before the rise of Roman dominance. This narrows our search to a specific window in history, a world of vibrant scholarship and fierce intellectual competition. Within that world, one place shines as the most likely candidate, the island of Rhodes. In the 2nd century before the Common Era, Rhodes was not just a bustling trade hub, it was a beacon of learning, a nexus where astronomy, mathematics, and advanced engineering converged. It was the home of Hipparchus, perhaps the greatest observational astronomer of antiquity. Hipparchus is famed for his star catalogue, his discovery of the precession of the equinoxes, and his development of the very geometric models for planetary motion that the mechanism so brilliantly translates into gears. The intellectual atmosphere he helped cultivate on Rhodes would have been the perfect incubator for such a revolutionary device. It is not difficult to imagine a brilliant student of his school, or a team of craftsmen inspired by his theories, attempting to build a physical model of their master's cosmic vision. Yet another tantalizing thread leads even further west to the legendary figure of Archimedes in Syracuse. The Roman orator Cicero, writing more than a century after the mechanism was likely built, described 2 bronze machines brought to Rome as war plunder. One, he said, was a globe that showed the motions of the sun, moon, and planets, constructed by Archimedes himself. The description is hauntingly familiar. While the Antikythera Mechanism is too late to have been made by Archimedes, who lived in the 3rd century before the Common Era, it could very well be a descendant of his work, built by followers who preserved and advanced his mechanical traditions. Whether from the school of Hipparchus on Rhodes or inspired by the legacy of Archimedes in Syracuse, one truth becomes undeniable. This was not the product of a lone, isolated genius tinkering in a shed. The sophistication of the design, the flawless execution, and the depth of integrated knowledge all point to something profound, a vibrant and advanced technological tradition that flourished in the Hellenistic world. This tradition possessed theoretical knowledge, precision metalworking skills, and a drive to model the universe that we simply never knew existed at such a level. The mechanism is not an anomaly, it is a survivor, the sole physical relic of a lost chapter in human ingenuity, a chapter whose other pages have turned to dust. This raises a final, profound question. What was this masterpiece of bronze and intellect actually for? It was certainly not a navigational tool for the deck of a ship, too fragile and intricate for the salt spray and rough handling of a sea voyage. Its true purpose lies not in utility but in understanding. The prevailing view among scholars is that this was an educational device, a philosopher's teaching tool of unparalleled sophistication. Picture a quiet room in a library or academy, sunlight filtering through a high window. A master, perhaps a follower of the ideas of Hipparchus or Plato, gathers students around a wooden table. In his hands is this gleaming mechanism. As he slowly turns the single-hand crank on its side, a small miracle unfolds. On the front dial, the sun pointer glides through the Zodiac, while the moon pointer traces its own complex, variable path. On the back, the pointers creep along their spirals, marking the passage of months and the ominous approach of eclipse seasons. With each rotation, the abstract mathematics of the cosmos, the epicycles and anomalies discussed in theory, become visible, tangible, and undeniable. The students are not just hearing about the harmony of the spheres, they are watching it operate on a tabletop. This was a powerful demonstration of a core tenet of Greek natural philosophy, that the universe is orderly, predictable, and governed by comprehensible laws. The machine was a physical argument for a rational cosmos, a universe that could be modeled and therefore understood. It also served a deeply practical pedagogical function, training those same students in the art of astronomical prediction, calculating festival dates, agricultural cycles, and celestial events. And yes, this almost certainly included what we would call astrology, the interpretation of celestial omens for personal or state guidance, a discipline utterly inseparable from the science of its day. The Antikythera Mechanism, therefore, was far more than a calculator. It was a catalyst for thought, a bridge between abstract theory and observable reality, designed to shape how the brightest minds of its era perceived the very fabric of their world. Yet the mechanism did not emerge from a vacuum of genius. It was the brilliant product of a specific, fertile moment in history, a time when the known world was suddenly stitched together by conquest and curiosity. This was the Hellenistic period, the 3 centuries following the death of Alexander the Great. Alexander's vast empire shattered into rival kingdoms, but it left behind a common cultural and intellectual language, Greek, that stretched from the shores of Sicily to the borders of India. For the first time, the accumulated knowledge of ancient civilizations, the precise astronomical records of Babylon, the geometry of Egypt, and the philosophical traditions of Greece itself, began to mix and cross-pollinate in bustling new metropolitan centers. Kings, eager to showcase their power and sophistication, poured vast wealth into patronage. In Ptolemaic Egypt, the rulers founded the legendary Library and Museum of Alexandria, a state-funded research institution where scholars were paid to think, write, and experiment. It was a think tank on a royal scale. Similar, if smaller, centers of learning thrived in places like Pergamon and, crucially, on the island of Rhodes. This environment did not just allow innovation, it actively demanded and rewarded it. In this atmosphere, figures like Ctesibius of Alexandria pioneered pneumatics, building singing automated birds and water clocks of astonishing complexity. Later, Hero of Alexandria would describe devices powered by steam and compressed air, including a working temple door that seemed to open by divine will. These were not mere toys, they were demonstrations of principle, explorations of the mechanics of the natural world. When you hear of Hero's Eolipile, a spinning sphere driven by steam jets, you realize the ancients were tinkering with the very foundations of engine technology. Against this backdrop, the Antikythera Mechanism stops looking like a miraculous outlier. Instead, it appears as the logical, if supremely elegant, pinnacle of a widespread and sophisticated tradition of precision engineering. It was the ultimate expression of a culture that believed the cosmos operated like a great machine, and that humanity could, with enough skill and insight, build a working model of it. The tragedy is not that it was made, but that this entire tradition of high craftsmanship, this golden age of gears and inquiry, was so fragile. It depended on royal patronage, on stable trade routes for materials, and on the uninterrupted transmission of specialized knowledge from master to apprentice. As the Roman world gradually shifted and later fractured, those conditions vanished. The great libraries declined, workshops were dispersed, and the deep, hands-on understanding required to create such artifacts faded from memory. The mechanism is not an alien artifact. It is a survivor from a road not taken, a gleaming testament to a path of scientific and mechanical development that history for a long while forgot. But the silence that followed its creation speaks louder than its gears ever could. If this technology was so advanced, so profound, why did it vanish from the Earth for more than a millennium, leaving no trace in the historical record until that diver's hand closed around it in 1900? The disappearance of the Antikythera Mechanism's knowledge is not a simple mystery of a single lost object. It is the story of an entire intellectual ecosystem collapsing. The first and perhaps most crucial factor was the end of the world that built it. The vibrant, competing Hellenistic kingdoms, with their rival courts pouring resources into dazzling displays of knowledge to attract the best minds, began to fade. One by one, they were absorbed into the expanding Roman Republic and later the Roman Empire. The Romans were masterful engineers, but their genius was of a different kind. They built for permanence and practicality, aqueducts that brought water, roads that connected an empire, and monumental architecture that projected power. They admired Greek philosophy and astronomy, often as a prestigious ornament, but they had less institutional interest in funding the kind of open-ended, theoretical research and precision craftsmanship that produced devices like the mechanism. The state-sponsored think tanks like the Museum of Alexandria lost their primary patrons. The financial fuel for pure inquiry slowly ran dry. Furthermore, the knowledge itself was inherently fragile. Building such a device required a rare synthesis of skills, a master who understood complex astronomical theory, a metallurgist who could cast bronze without flaws, and a craftsman who could cut gear teeth with micrometer precision, all likely working in the same workshop. This was not mass-produced knowledge, it was a secret craft passed meticulously from teacher to apprentice. As demand for such exquisite artifacts waned, and as social stability frayed, those chains of transmission were broken. The last master might have taken the secrets of the epicyclic gear to his final resting place, with no one left to teach. Then came the shocks of conflict. While we must avoid graphic detail, history tells us that periods of war and upheaval often led to the loss of cultural treasures. Great libraries, the repositories of written knowledge that could have preserved the theoretical blueprints, faced damage and dispersal. Workshops were destroyed, their tools scattered. In such times, the survival of a delicate bronze computer, or the scrolls that explained its making, was a matter of chance. The knowledge did not vanish in a day. It faded like a forgotten language, becoming first esoteric, then obscure, and finally mythical. The Antikythera Mechanism therefore stands as a solemn monument to a terrifying truth. Technological progress is not an inevitable ladder we climb. It is more like a river. Its course can be diverted. Its waters can sink into the sand, and its path can be lost for ages until someone stumbles upon the dry riverbed and wonders at the civilization that once sailed there. The silence of the original fragments has finally been broken by the sound of turning gears. Inspired by the revelations of the CT scans, a new generation of engineers and historians have taken on an extraordinary challenge to build the Antikythera Mechanism anew. This is not mere replication, it is a form of experimental archaeology, a dialogue with the past conducted through brass, steel, and plastic. Teams around the world, from London to California, have used the digital blueprints to construct physical, working models. Each turn of the crank on these modern recreations is a test of ancient theory, proving that the design was not just a beautiful idea, but a fully functional machine. The legendary curator Michael Wright spent decades crafting a breathtakingly precise model in brass, painstakingly cutting each gear by hand to match the ghostly shadows in the X-rays. In a more playful but no less serious tribute, Apple engineer Andrew Carroll built a stunningly accurate version entirely from Lego, using hundreds of plastic bricks and gears to replicate the complex planetary trains. These projects are far more than impressive displays. They are vital research tools. By attempting to build the device, modern makers confront the exact same problems the original engineers faced. They must calculate gear ratios with absolute precision, ensure dozens of interdependent cycles align perfectly over decades, and solve the mechanical puzzles of components that did not survive the shipwreck. The process reveals the immense, hands-on skill required. Crafting a single gear with teeth cut at a perfect 60-degree angle is a feat of miniature craftsmanship. Aligning all of them so that the Eclipse cycle and the Metonic spiral remain synchronized for centuries is an act of profound mathematical vision. Every successful model that predicts an eclipse or tracks the moon's wobble is a powerful affirmation. It tells us the ancient understanding encoded in bronze was correct, and that the lost makers possessed not just theoretical knowledge, but the supreme workshop skill to bring it to life. These reconstructions are bridges across time, allowing us to hold a functioning piece of a forgotten world in our hands, and in doing so, they transform the mechanism from a static artifact into a living conversation about the limits of ancient ingenuity. Yet for all we have learned, the machine refuses to surrender all its mysteries. The deeper we look, the more questions emerge from the bronze. How, for instance, were the 5 planetary displays precisely arranged on that crowded front face? The surviving fragments show mounting points for pointers, but their exact configuration and the complete gear trains that drove them are still a matter of fierce scholarly debate. Each proposed reconstruction is a different argument about ancient priorities. Was Venus given a more prominent position than Mars? Did the design sacrifice some accuracy for the sake of symmetry or beauty? We simply do not know. Then there is the tantalizing question of the casing. The existing fragments are the intricate clockwork, but what did the outside look like? Many researchers, including Tony Freeth of the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project, argue compellingly for a double-sided wooden case with doors that open to reveal the dials. This case might have been inscribed with a star map, or even featured tiny animated figures that moved with the cycles, turning predictions into a miniature theatrical display. Such embellishments would transform the device from a calculator into a spectacle, meant to awe and educate in equal measure. This leads to perhaps the most profound unknown of all. Was this the only one? The sheer refinement of the design suggests it cannot be the first of its kind. It feels like a Model T, not a crude prototype. Did it have a predecessor, a larger, even more complex version built for a royal court or a great library? Was it part of a small series of such devices, each customized for a different philosopher king? Every time a researcher deciphers a new word from the CT scans or identifies the function of a previously misunderstood gear, the story shifts. A single preposition, a fresh reading of an inscription, can overturn years of theory. This is why the Antikythera Mechanism is not a relic locked in a glass case, but a living, breathing field of study. It remains an active conversation across centuries, a puzzle that ensures our understanding of antiquity is never quite finished, always ready to be rewritten with the next turn of a page or the next click of a mouse. That ongoing conversation has now spilled far beyond the quiet halls of academia. The Antikythera Mechanism has completed a remarkable journey from an obscure museum fragment to a genuine cultural icon. It is the subject of countless major documentaries, a star of museum exhibitions worldwide, and has even inspired plotlines in best-selling novels and television series. Its influence is most creatively felt in the realm of steampunk, a genre fascinated by alternate histories of technology. The very concept of a complex, anachronistic mechanical computer is the living heart of steampunk aesthetics. It directly inspired fictional marvels like the Difference Engine, a speculative Victorian computer dreamed up by authors William Gibson and Bruce Sterling. In these stories, the mechanism is not just an artifact, it is a proof of concept, a seed for an entire world that might have been. It resonates because it embodies three powerful ideas simultaneously. First, it is a stunning monument to pure human ingenuity, a spark of brilliance that feels both ancient and eerily modern. Second, it whispers of lost golden ages, of advanced knowledge that flickered and died, feeding our fascination with forgotten chapters and hidden histories. And third, it represents the thrilling, puzzle-solving nature of science itself. Its story is not one of a single eureka moment, but of a century-long detective case, pieced together by linguists, historians, astronomers, and engineers using ever more sophisticated tools. The public embraces it because it is a beautiful, tangible object that contains a narrative far larger than itself. We can look at its corroded gears and see not just a machine, but the entire fragile arc of human understanding, a reminder that our peaks of achievement are never permanent, and that every golden age carries within it the seeds of its own silence. This transformation from curious lump to cultural touchstone proves that the greatest discoveries are those that change not just what we know, but how we see our entire journey through time. The Antikythera Mechanism's lonely brilliance makes more sense when we realize it was not a solitary star, but the brightest in a forgotten constellation. Classical literature is filled with tantalizing whispers of other mechanical marvels, devices that prove the drive to build and automate was alive in the ancient world. The Roman author Cicero, for instance, described with awe a bronze sphere built by Archimedes that replicated the motions of the sun, moon, and planets, a device so sophisticated it was brought to Rome as a prize of war. While this particular globe is lost, its description aligns perfectly with the kind of knowledge required to build our mechanism. Then there was Hero of Alexandria, an engineer of the 1st century who wrote entire books on pneumatics and automata. He described temple doors that seemed to open by themselves, a wind-powered organ, and even a simple steam-powered sphere called an eolipile that spun on its axis. These were not just clever toys, they were serious explorations of mechanical principles, of air pressure, heat, and motion. They represent a culture actively experimenting with the forces of nature, asking not only how the cosmos worked, but how that knowledge could be made to perform. The archaeological record, though sparse, offers tangible proof that geared devices were more than just literary fantasies. From the ruins of a Roman villa comes a small, exquisite portable sundial discovered at Aphrodisias. Made of bronze, it features a complex lunar calendar and a system of gears to adjust for the changing dates of the month. It is a miniature cousin to the Antikythera, a personal timekeeper for a wealthy traveler. Centuries later, Byzantine craftsmen produced portable astrolabes, intricate star chart calculators made of stacked brass plates with pivoting pointers. These instruments required a deep understanding of geometry and precision metalworking. What links all these objects, from Hero's theatrical automata to the traveler's sundial, is a shared technological language. They all rely on principles of gearing, calibration, and the translation of celestial mathematics into physical form. The Antikythera Mechanism simply speaks this language with a vastly more advanced vocabulary. It did not emerge from a vacuum of genius, but from a rich and sustained tradition of craftsmanship and inquiry. Seeing the mechanism as the pinnacle of this tradition changes everything. It transforms the artifact from a shocking anomaly into the logical, if extraordinary, peak of a technological landscape we are only beginning to map. Our history books have often portrayed the ancient world in broad strokes of philosophy, art, and empire, with the narrative of complex machinery starting 1,000 years later in medieval Europe. But these scattered devices, both described and discovered, suggest a different story. They hint at workshops where philosophers, astronomers, and master metalworkers collaborated. They suggest a clientele, from wealthy patrons to scholarly institutions, who valued these demonstrations of cosmic order and technical skill. This was a landscape where knowledge of gear ratios and eclipse cycles was cultivated, passed down, and refined over generations. The tragedy is not that the Antikythera was built, but that this entire landscape, with its networks of knowledge and its culture of high-precision engineering, was so vulnerable to the tides of history. When we place the mechanism back into this broader context, its story becomes even more powerful, not as a mystery of a single lost object, but as a testament to a flourishing path of human innovation that was, for a time, brilliantly pursued. This single artifact forces us to redraw the timeline of human invention with a bolder, more complex hand. The Antikythera Mechanism does not simply add an earlier chapter to the story of technology. It demands we rewrite the entire table of contents. For generations, the accepted narrative placed the birth of high-precision, complex gearing firmly in medieval Europe around the 1400s with the great cathedral clocks. That story is now irrevocably broken. The mechanism proves that such engineering was not only possible, but had been mastered over 1,000 years earlier, in a world we still associate more with marble statues than with micrometer gears. This is not a minor correction of dates, it is a fundamental shift in perspective. It means that the spark of mechanical genius, the drive to model natural laws with intricate machinery, flared brightly in classical antiquity, only to be smothered and forgotten for centuries. Our historical timeline was not a steady, upward climb, but a landscape with peaks and valleys, where an entire mountain range of knowledge was lost from view. The implications reach beyond just the gears themselves and into the very nature of scientific thought. The device demonstrates that ancient astronomers did not merely observe the heavens and write down theories. They possessed a profound, applied understanding. Concepts like the lunar anomaly, the subtle speeding up and slowing down of the moon's orbit, were not just abstract mathematical problems noted by a thinker like Hipparchus. They were engineering challenges that were successfully solved, translated from parchment into a working bronze model with a stunning pin and slot mechanism. The same is true for predicting eclipses through the Saros cycle. This was not vague celestial forecasting. It was precise, mechanical computation. The builders moved from knowing that something happened to building a machine that could show when it would happen again, decades into the future. This represents a different tier of knowledge altogether, a synthesis of theory and hands-on craftsmanship that we rarely attribute to the ancient world. It reveals a scientific culture capable of turning insight into instrument, a culture that valued predictive, tangible proof of its cosmological models. This realization directly challenges a long-held and deeply ingrained historical view, the idea of a great interruption often called the Dark Ages. The traditional Eurocentric narrative tells of classical knowledge being lost after the fall of Rome, only to be rediscovered and revived during the Renaissance, leading directly to our modern scientific revolution. The Antikythera Mechanism complicates that clean, linear story in a profound way. It suggests that some threads of ancient knowledge were not just misplaced for a while, they were severed completely. The specific tradition of high-precision mechanical engineering, the workshop's secrets for crafting and assembling such devices, appears to have vanished without a trace. It was not sitting in a library waiting to be found, it was gone. Therefore, what the Renaissance scholars recovered was an incomplete picture, the philosophical and mathematical texts, but not the accompanying mechanical art. This means that in certain specialized areas, ancient science and technology may have reached a level of sophistication that was not matched again until perhaps the 16th or 17th centuries. We are not looking at primitive precursors to later technology. We are looking at a parallel achievement, a different path to understanding the cosmos that was, for a time, brilliantly walked. The mechanism stands as a permanent reminder that progress is not a single, unbroken line, but a fragile tapestry, and that some of its most intricate patterns can be unraveled by the passage of time, leaving only a single, cryptic fragment to hint at the grandeur of the whole design. The vessel carrying this cosmic computer was itself a marvel of its age. It was not a small trading vessel but a colossal grain ship, stretching over 40 meters from bow to stern, a floating warehouse of the ancient Mediterranean. Such ships were the heavy freighters of their day, built for bulk cargo like Egyptian wheat, but this one had been repurposed for a far more delicate and luxurious mission. Its hold was packed not with sacks of grain, but with priceless works of art and technology, a carefully curated collection of the finest goods from the Greek East, bound for the heart of a rising superpower, Rome. Among the silent marble faces of philosophers and gods, the shimmer of delicate glassware, and the gleam of gold jewelry, the Antikythera Mechanism traveled. It was nestled within a cargo that represented the ultimate expression of Roman elite taste in the 1st century before the Common Era, a taste for imported Greek culture, sophistication, and knowledge. This context transforms the mechanism from an isolated scientific instrument into something else entirely, a luxury commodity, a piece of intellectual plunder. Its presence on a commercial vessel tells us that such devices, while undoubtedly rare and exquisitely expensive, were considered transportable goods. They had a market value, someone commissioned it, someone packed it with immense care among statues padded with straw, and someone expected to sell it for a fortune on the other end of the journey. The most compelling theory suggests it was destined for a specific, powerful Roman patron. The timeline of the wreck, around 70 years before the Common Era, coincides with a period of intense cultural appropriation, when Roman generals and aristocrats were voraciously collecting Greek art and artifacts to display in their villas as symbols of power and refinement. It is not difficult to envision the mechanism as the ultimate conversation piece, ordered by a figure like Julius Caesar himself, or a wealthy member of his circle such as the scholar Marcus Tullius Cicero, who wrote of such marvelous devices. Imagine it displayed in a sunlit Roman atrium, not in a scholar's study, but as a dazzling demonstration of the owner's reach and intellect, a trophy proving that Rome could possess not just the territories of the Hellenistic world, but its most profound secrets. The shipwreck, therefore, is far more than an archaeological site. It is a frozen moment in a vast economic and cultural exchange. It captures the vibrant, interconnected economy of the Mediterranean, where grain, art, ideas, and high technology all moved along the same sea lane. The silent wreckage holds a profound irony. The most advanced piece of machinery from the ancient world was lost not in the collapse of an empire or the burning of a library, but in a simple, brutal accident of commerce, a storm that sent a shipload of luxury and genius to the ocean floor, where it would wait 2,000 years to tell its true story. That single storm off Antikythera did more than sink a ship. It created a unique and perilous time capsule. For 2 millennia, the bronze fragments of the mechanism lay encased in a hard, concrete-like shell of sea deposits, a mix of calcium carbonate, sand, and corroded metal. This crust, while aggressive, also acted as a protective cocoon, holding the delicate gear trains in the exact position they were in when the ship settled on the seabed. The moment they were brought to the surface and that crust began to dry and crack, a new clock started ticking, a race against a different kind of entropy. Today, the primary fragments reside in a specially controlled room at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, where conservators face a dilemma as complex as the machine itself. Every decision is a balance between 2 vital needs: the urgent need to preserve what remains and the equally compelling need to understand it. The bronze is no longer metal in the conventional sense. It has undergone a process called mineralization. The original copper and tin have slowly been replaced by minerals from the seawater, transforming the gears into a brittle, ceramic-like material that can crumble at a touch. The original wooden case that once housed this cosmic calculator vanished centuries ago in the water, leaving only ghostly impressions in the corrosion on some fragments, like a shadow of a long rotted frame. This fragility means that every physical interaction, every attempt to clean or separate a fragment, carries irreversible risk. A single misplaced tool could reduce a 2,000-year-old differential gear to dust. So the work proceeds with a patience that matches the artifact's age. Conservators work under high-powered microscopes, using fine needles and miniature tools to gently loosen incrustations, not to restore the mechanism to a shiny, new appearance, but to stabilize its current state. They control the humidity and temperature of its environment with extreme precision, preventing further corrosion from the modern air. Much of the investigation has now shifted from physical intervention to digital preservation. High-resolution, 3-dimensional scans, like those from the computed tomography machine, have become the primary tool for study, creating perfect virtual copies that researchers can explore endlessly without ever risking the original. This digital archive is a gift to the future, ensuring that even if the physical fragments continue their slow decay, their complete blueprint is saved. In this quiet room in Athens, a different kind of science unfolds, one of meticulous care rather than bold discovery. It recognizes a profound truth that every speck of corrosion, every discoloration on the bronze, is itself a historical document. It holds clues about the shipwreck environment, the composition of ancient alloys, and the very passage of time. The goal is not to stop time, but to slow it down enough so that future generations, armed with technologies we cannot yet conceive, can peer into this artifact anew. They may have tools that can read the faintest traces of ink now invisible, or analyze the molecular structure of the bronze to pinpoint its exact workshop origin. The ongoing conservation is therefore a silent pact across centuries, a commitment to preserve the questions as much as the answers, ensuring this 2,000-year-old computer remains a conversation, not a closed book. But the story of this machine is far from over. The very technologies that have brought its secrets to light now promise to reveal even deeper layers of understanding. The next frontier in Antikythera research lies with imaging tools that can see what X-rays and computed tomography cannot. Techniques like neutron tomography, which uses subatomic particles to pass through dense materials, could potentially map the internal structure of the most corroded fragments in stunning new detail, perhaps revealing hidden pins or alignment marks. Advanced Reflectance Transformation Imaging, or RTI, uses multiple photographs under angled lighting to digitally enhance the surface of an object, bringing inscriptions so faint they are invisible to the naked eye into sharp, readable focus. A single new word, a number, or a symbol recovered from the bronze could unlock a complete understanding of a planetary gear train or clarify a disputed function. Beyond new ways of seeing, there is the power of new ways of thinking. Artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms could be trained on the known geometry of the device to propose the most likely configurations for its missing components. Instead of a single reconstruction, we might generate an entire family of plausible designs, each a different interpretation of the ancient engineer's intent, allowing us to test which model best fits the surviving evidence and the astronomical data of the time. This digital experimentation could effectively simulate centuries of lost workshop trial and error in a matter of days, and the source itself, the silent wreck site, still holds potential. Modern robotic submersibles equipped with precise mapping tools and gentle suction dredges could systematically excavate areas of the seabed that were inaccessible to the sponge divers of 1900. It is not beyond possibility that another gear, another inscribed plate, or even fragments of a second related device still rest in the sediment. The discovery of even one more cog could resolve debates that have lasted for decades. The coming years, therefore, are not about closing the book on the Antikythera Mechanism, but about opening new volumes. Each technological leap offers a sharper lens on this ancient marvel, promising to peel back another layer of its 2,000-year-old mystery and bring us closer to hearing the full, uninterrupted conversation between its creators and the cosmos they sought to capture in bronze. That drive to decode the universe is a fundamental, timeless aspect of the human spirit. The Antikythera Mechanism is, in its most profound sense, a physical manifestation of a question as old as consciousness itself. Why do the stars move as they do? What unseen order governs the dance of the planets? The unknown creators of this device looked up at the same night sky we see today, but they did something extraordinary. They refused to accept the heavens as a mere spectacle or a canvas for stories alone. They saw a puzzle, a magnificent clockwork puzzle written in light. And so they built a key. They chose to engage with the cosmos not through supplication, but through simulation. They replaced myth with mechanism, believing that if they could understand the rules, they could build a model that obeyed them. This shift from storytelling to system building is one of the most significant leaps a culture can make. It is the moment we stop asking the gods for answers and start building our own tools to find them. In those intricate bronze gears, we see the birth of a new relationship with reality, one based on observation, prediction, and tangible proof. The machine is a declaration cast in metal that the universe is comprehensible. Every turn of its crank was a quiet argument against chaos, a statement that behind the apparent randomness of eclipses and planetary loops lay a beautiful mathematical harmony. This is why the device feels so strangely modern to us. Its makers were not so different from a team at a modern research institute, combining theoretical physics with precision engineering to create a predictive model. They were driven by the same core curiosity that sends probes to Mars or builds particle colliders underground, a deep need to know how things work. The mechanism connects us across the abyss of 2,000 years because it speaks a universal language, the language of inquiry. It reminds us that the spark of science is not the possession of any one era or civilization, but a flame that has flickered in the human mind for millennia, sometimes burning brightly, sometimes guttering low, but never fully extinguished. In that shared spark, we find our kinship with those ancient thinkers. We are still asking their questions, we are still building tools to extend our senses and our understanding, and we are still, in our own way, trying to build a working model of everything. The Antikythera Mechanism is a key that unlocks a forgotten door in the mansion of human history. Behind that door lies a corridor we did not know existed, filled with the echoes of a different kind of ancient world, one where philosophers and engineers collaborated to build working models of the cosmos. This artifact does not simply sit on a shelf in that mansion. It forces us to walk down that corridor and reconsider the entire floor plan. It presents us with an uncomfortable, humbling truth. Civilizations can reach dazzling intellectual heights, creating works of such sophistication that they feel out of place in their own time. And then, through the slow accumulation of turmoil, shifting priorities, and simple misfortune, watch that light dim. The specific knowledge, the hands-on craft of cutting those perfect bronze gears and aligning those epicyclic trains, was not stolen by invaders or burned in a single catastrophe. It faded. It became a secret without an apprentice, a technique no longer in demand, a library scroll that crumbled unread. The mechanism is the stark, physical proof that progress is not a guaranteed ascent. It is a fragile flame passed from one generation to the next, and it can be extinguished by the winds of change. This is why the device rewrites history. It does not add a polite footnote to the chapter on ancient Greece. It demands we tear out that chapter and rewrite it with a new understanding of what was possible. The traditional narrative of a steady, linear climb from primitive tools to complex machines is shattered. In its place, we see a landscape with lost peaks, a timeline where an entire mountain range of mechanical genius was submerged and forgotten for over 1,000 years. The mechanism stands as a dual testament. It is, first, a monument to the sheer, breathtaking genius of the ancient world, a genius that encompassed not just poetry and politics, but precision engineering of a caliber we never imagined. And second, it is a powerful, silent warning. It reminds us that knowledge is the most precious and perishable commodity we possess. It must be taught, shared, written down in multiple languages, and built into the foundations of society, or it can vanish as completely as if it had never been. Every time we look at its reconstructed gears, we are engaging in a conversation across 20 centuries. We are asking it questions with our scanners and our models, and it answers with the quiet, persistent turning of its bronze wheels. What it tells us is astonishing. It tells us that the drive to understand the universe through mechanism, to build a small, ticking replica of the heavens, is a profoundly human impulse, one that connects the workshop on Rhodes to the laboratories of today. It tells us that our story is deeper, more complex, and more wondrous than we ever knew. And it asks us quietly what marvels of our own age might one day lie silent on a future seabed, waiting for a curious mind to piece them back together and wonder how such light could ever have been allowed to fade.